I caught my future daughter-in-law pouring industrial superglue over the exact chair my disabled wife was supposed to sit in. My own son stood beside her, keeping watch, laughing. I didn't yell. I didn't cause a scene. I handled it the way a man who spent 40 years in commercial construction handles a structural flaw. I quietly fixed it. Hours later, when the wedding host called the bride up for her first dance, the sound of $18,000 of designer lace tearing apart echoed through a silent ballroom. But to understand how my son's perfect wedding became a nightmare of his own making, you need to know what happened 2 hours before it started. I'm Victor Langdon, 70 years old. I built a commercial contracting company from nothing, and I know the smell of drywall, the weight of steel, and the exact cost of loyalty. That Saturday morning, 2 hours before guests arrived at the city's most exclusive venue, I was there early, having just paid $15,000 out of pocket to upgrade the ballroom lighting because Derek said it would ruin the photos otherwise. I wrote the check like a fool, wanting everything to be perfect for him. The ballroom was empty when I walked in, and near the family table I heard a low giggle. I stopped in the shadows. Derek and his bride, Natalie, were standing over the velvet chair marked with a gold name tag, Catherine. My wife. Catherine had suffered a stroke 8 months earlier. She survived, but her mobility never fully came back. She walked with a cane and, in moments of stress, sometimes lost bladder control. It was a private, humiliating reality we protected fiercely. Natalie knew. Derek knew. And I watched her squeeze a thick, clear gel into the center of that cushion, working it deep into the fibers, while Derek murmured, "Make sure you get the edges. If she shifts, I want it to hold." Natalie giggled. "Once she sits on this for a few hours, she's not getting up without leaving half her dignity behind." I stepped out of the shadows. What exactly is going on here? Natalie nearly dropped the bottle. Derek recovered fast, stepping in front of her, smiling. "Dad, you scared us." Natalie noticed the cushion threading was loose. "We're just taping it down so Mom doesn't slip." It was a good lie. Caring, protective. If I'd spent my life behind a desk, I might have believed it. But I hadn't. I caught the sharp, chemical smell in the air. Not craft tape, not fabric glue. Industrial-grade heat-curing polyurethane adhesive. The kind we used on job sites to permanently fuse porous materials together. Exposed to body heat, it cures like concrete. The picture assembled itself instantly. Catherine sits down. 2 hours of dinner cures the glue. She stands for the first dance, and her silk gown tears clean off her body in front of 300 guests, exposing the undergarments she wore because of her stroke. This wasn't a prank. It was a calculated public execution of her dignity, and my son was helping build the guillotine. I wanted to grab him by the collar. Instead, I forced my face into exhaustion and gratitude. "Your mother's been so nervous today. Knowing you two are looking out for her means a lot." Derek's shoulders dropped, relieved, smug. "Of course, Dad. We love her." I turned and walked away, and somewhere behind me, the father who loved his son quietly died, replaced by the contractor who spent a lifetime cutting rot out of buildings before it spread. I wasn't going to throw that chair away. I was going to give them exactly the wedding they'd built. 10 minutes later, the bridal party left for garden photos. I slipped into a utility closet and waited until their laughter faded down the hall, then called Marcus, my estate manager. Together we lifted the treated cushion from Catherine's chair and swapped it with the identical one meant for Natalie, placement undisturbed, nothing visibly different. Then, for good measure, we coated a spare chair with the same adhesive and set it in Derek's place. The trap was reset for the actual architects of it. But a cold, nagging question sat under my ribs. Normal people don't build chemical traps for a cheap laugh. Derek was proud, image-obsessed. He'd never risk a public catastrophe at his own wedding without a serious payoff waiting on the other side. They needed an audience. They needed witnesses to see Catherine fail publicly, to look incompetent, broken. Why? I needed evidence. In my truck, I kept a rugged, voice-activated job site dictaphone, the kind that picks up whispers over jackhammers. I taped it to the underside of the sweetheart table, microphone angled exactly where their laps would be, and slipped back out unnoticed. That still wasn't enough. People who plot together leave a digital trail. Derek and Natalie were outside for photos, their dressing rooms unguarded. I went up to the groom's suite. His tablet sat open on the desk. I tried Derek's birth year. Rejected. Natalie's. Rejected. Catherine's birth year. It unlocked instantly. He'd used his mother's birthday to secure the device he was using to plan her destruction. I opened his messages with Natalie and searched Catherine. 3 weeks of texts turned from petty complaints about wheelchairs ruining photos into something colder. 2 days ago, Natalie had linked an industrial adhesive supplier. I bought it. It arrives tomorrow. Derek's reply, perfect. Make sure you pack it so the old man doesn't see it. Last night, Natalie, nervous. What if she notices the cushion is wet? Derek, she won't notice anything. Her legs are numb from the nerve damage. Then Natalie, promise me you'll have your phone ready. Once she stands and the dress rips, get the whole meltdown on video. Seeing her soil herself in front of the mayor and your dad's investors is exactly what we need. Derek, I know. Combine that video with her stroke records, and my lawyer says we have a slam-dunk case for a conservatorship. We force him to hand over the trust now. I can't wait 20 years for him to die. I set the tablet down like it had burned me. A conservatorship. They weren't planning a prank. They were staging a legal coup, manufacturing a public medical crisis so they could have Catherine declared incompetent, take control of our finances, and put us wherever they decided we belonged. I opened his email and searched conservatorship. Dozens of threads with a boutique estate attorney. Derek had built a fabricated file describing Catherine as cognitively deteriorated and me as an unstable, denial-riddled husband, attaching her stolen medical records. The attorney's most recent reply said judges needed a documented public incident before granting full conservatorship. Undeniable visual proof. Derek had promised him one, guaranteed for this weekend, and attached screenshots of the exact texts I'd already read, archived as evidence for the petition he intended to file Monday morning. It was never about Catherine's health. It was about the Langdon Trust. 15 years of my life's work, structured so Derek wouldn't touch the principal until he turned 50, or we were both gone. He didn't want to wait. He was willing to destroy his own mother to skip the line. Then I found the money. Natalie had spent 6 months bragging that her family was covering this $300,000 wedding. But every vendor invoice, florist, caterer, venue, the $18,000 Vera Wang gown, was billed straight to Langdon Commercial Contracting. Derek, my VP of Regional Operations, had invented a fake industrial warehouse project in our accounting system and laundered every luxury expense through it. $55,000 in flowers coded as soil stabilization, $84,000 in catering, coded as excavation equipment rental. The wedding gown itself, expensed as steel scaffolding. He wasn't just plotting to steal our future. He was actively embezzling from 300 employees who depended on that company to feed their families. Funding, with stolen money, the very party where he planned to destroy his mother. I locked the tablet, set it back exactly where I found it, and walked to the stairwell. I called Thomas, my corporate attorney, a man who'd spent 20 years protecting my company from predators. I told him everything. The fraud, the fake project, the conservatorship plot. His silence said more than words could. Then I gave him his orders. Freeze every account Derek could touch. Kill his corporate cards. Strip his server access. Draft emergency paperwork to remove him as sole beneficiary of the Langdon Trust and reroute it toward stroke research and charity. So the fortune he tried to steal by weaponizing his mother's illness would instead go toward curing it. And compile everything, the fake invoices, the doctored budgets, into a formal embezzlement complaint, ready for the police the moment their doors opened Monday. Thomas didn't hesitate. Neither did I. The trap was set on every level. All I had to do was survive the wedding. I stood through the ceremony with a practiced smile, while they recited vows about trust and loyalty. I clapped with 300 guests who had no idea they were applauding a pair of embezzlers. At the reception, I walked Catherine to her chair, the clean one, the one I'd swapped with my own hands, and eased her into it, watching her sigh with relief, completely safe. Natalie settled into hers across the table, lowering her Vera Wang gown onto the cushion, soaked with curing adhesive, and for one unguarded second, she shot Catherine a look like a butcher sizing up a lamb. Then she looked at me. I raised my champagne glass in a slow, silent toast. Her confidence flickered. Dinner ran its course. Body heat did its work. An hour in, Natalie started shifting, tugging at her waist, blaming her corset. She had no idea the dress was already fusing to the seat. Derek stood for his toast and turned to face me directly, delivering a speech dressed up as devotion, about protecting family when they can no longer care for themselves, about difficult decisions. He was laying the conservatorship narrative down in front of 300 witnesses, smiling at me like he'd already won. I clapped along, warm and proud on the outside, ice on the inside. Then came the first dance. The lights dimmed, the spotlight found them, and Derek offered Natalie his hand. She smiled for the cameras, shifted her weight to rise, and didn't move. She tugged at her skirt, assuming it was caught. She braced against the table and heaved upward. The chair tilted with her, then slammed back down. Panic broke through the makeup. She wrenched herself forward with everything she had, and the dress gave way with a tearing sound that cut through the silent ballroom, shredding from her spine down through her thighs. She pitched forward, table and glassware crashing with her, and hit the marble floor in front of 300 phones, the chair still cemented to the ruined gown, her humiliation exactly as complete and as public as the one she'd built for my wife. Derek stood frozen, then turned, and finally understood exactly who he'd been underestimating. Bridesmaids threw a table runner over her. Derek dragged her off the floor in a hunched, humiliating retreat and up to the bridal suite, leaving a trail of shredded silk behind them. I stayed a moment longer beside Catherine, safe, untouched, watching the spectacle with quiet shock, reassured her, and followed at my own pace. A man holding every winning card doesn't need to run. I found the suite in chaos, Natalie sobbing into a couch cushion, with the chair still attached to her back, her mother hacking uselessly at cured adhesive with floral scissors, Derek pacing and pale. He rounded on me first, pointing, shouting that I'd picked a venue with defective chairs, that I'd ruined their wedding, expecting me to apologize, to write a check, to fix it the way I always had. I said nothing. I walked past him, locked the door, and let the silence do the work. Silence always does better than shouting. I connected my phone to the suite's television and played the dictaphone recording. Natalie's voice filled the room, whining that Catherine was taking too long to embarrass herself. Derek's voice, right behind it, told her to be patient. The longer she sat, the tighter the bond, and to have her camera ready for the lawyer. Natalie's mother covered her mouth. I followed the audio with the screenshots, the texts, the emails to the estate attorney, the line about not waiting 20 years for me to die, mirrored in high definition on the wall for her parents to read for themselves. Derek tried to call it dark humor, stress, nothing they'd actually do. I didn't let him finish. I laid out the itemized vendor invoices and the fake warehouse project side by side and told him, and everyone in that room, exactly what he'd done. Embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from my company to fund a wedding where he planned to destroy his own mother for a conservatorship he'd already started drafting. I told him Thomas had already frozen every account, killed every card, and terminated his position. I told him the embezzlement file would be on a detective's desk Monday morning, family or not. He dropped to his knees, begging, promising to pay it back, to sign away the trust, to keep it quiet. I peeled his hands off my trousers and told him he'd lost the right to call himself my son the moment he decided his mother's illness was a resource to exploit. Natalie's parents walked out on their daughter in silence, disgusted by what they'd raised. I walked out on mine and didn't look back. Downstairs, I found Catherine composed and steady at our table. I draped my jacket over her shoulders, and we walked out of that ballroom together, leaving the whispers and the wreckage behind us for good. A year has passed. Monday morning after the wedding, Thomas handed the embezzlement file to the Financial Crimes Division exactly as promised, and the investigation moved fast. Derek's trail was as sloppy as his arrogance. He pleaded guilty to fraud and grand theft and is now sitting in a federal facility awaiting sentencing, looking at 7 to 10 years with no wealthy father coming to soften the landing. Natalie filed for divorce 3 weeks after the wedding to distance herself from his charges, but the fraudulent funds behind the wedding were seized in the audit, leaving her and her parents personally liable for the vendor debts. She lost the fortune, the image, and the marriage in one night, and is now known publicly as the bride who got cemented to a chair at her own wedding. I sold the company for a life-changing sum to a national developer, restructured the Langdon Trust into an ironclad firewall funding stroke research, and Catherine and I are currently watching the sun go down from the balcony of a cruise ship somewhere in the Mediterranean. She doesn't need her cane anymore. Freed from the quiet pressure our son had been putting on her without her even knowing it, her recovery accelerated faster than her doctors expected. Blood is a biological coincidence. It doesn't guarantee loyalty, and it doesn't excuse cruelty against the people who trusted you most. Family is built on respect and the instinct to protect, not on what you can extract from someone. Catherine and I built our life on 40 years of that kind of loyalty, and when it was threatened by the one person who should have protected it most, we defended it, and we're the ones sitting in the sunshine now. Never apologize for surviving. If this story struck a nerve, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories about betrayal and fighting back, and tell me in the comments what you would have done with that superglue. Stay strong, everyone.